The HOA letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, demanding Rachel Morgan dismantle the playground she'd built in her backyard within 7 days, citing zoning violations and neighborhood aesthetics. But what they didn't know was that every child on Maple Ridge Lane considered that swing set sacred ground, and Rachel had just decided that if the HOA wanted it gone, they could come explain that to 20 furious families themselves. Rachel Morgan stood in her kitchen reading the certified letter for the third time. Her hands trembled slightly as she set it down on the granite countertop, the HOA letterhead seeming to mock her with its embossed gold seal. 7 days, she whispered to herself. They're giving me 7 days. The playground equipment in her backyard had cost her nearly $8,000. Custom wooden fort, 3 swings, a slide, monkey bars, and a sandbox she'd personally filled with premium play sand. She'd built it 6 months ago after her daughter Emma had begged for a place where the neighborhood kids could play together safely. Emma was at school now, oblivious to the fact that her favorite place in the world was apparently a zoning violation. Rachel picked up her phone and called her neighbor, Diana Chen, who'd always been friendly and whose son played on the equipment almost daily. "Diana, did you get a letter from the HOA? About your playground?" Diana's voice dropped. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. Gerald and I had nothing to do with this. We love that playground." "Who complained?" "I heard it was Preston Whitmore. He lives 3 houses down from you. Apparently, he can see part of your backyard from his upstairs window and he thinks the equipment is an eyesore." Rachel's jaw clenched. Preston Whitmore was the HOA president, a retired corporate attorney who treated the neighborhood like his personal fiefdom. She'd met him exactly once at a mandatory HOA meeting where he'd spent 40 minutes explaining why everyone's mailbox needed to be the same shade of black. "The letter says it violates Article 7, Section 3 of the Covenant," Rachel said. "No permanent recreational structures visible from neighboring properties without prior written approval." "That's ridiculous. Your fence is 6 feet tall. How is it visible?" "Apparently, if any part of it can be seen from any angle, including from second-story windows, it counts." Diana sighed. "Preston's been on a power trip lately. Last month he fined the Hendersons for having their trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. It was a Sunday. Their can had blown over." Rachel hung up and walked to her backyard. The playground stood in the far corner, painted in cheerful primary colors. Emma and 5 other kids from the street had been there yesterday afternoon, their laughter filling the air. The Hendersons twins, Diana's son Marcus, the Kowalski girl, others whose names she'd learned over the months. Her phone buzzed, a text from another neighbor, Jennifer Kowalski. "Just heard about the HOA letter. This is insane. Lily loves that playground. Is there anything we can do?" Rachel stared at the message, then at the playground, then back at the certified letter sitting on her kitchen counter. That evening, Rachel knocked on Preston Whitmore's door. He answered wearing a cardigan and reading glasses, looking every bit the bureaucrat he'd been his entire career. "Mrs. Morgan," he said coolly, "I assume you received our notice." "I did. I wanted to discuss it with you in person." "There's nothing to discuss. The structure violates covenant restrictions. It needs to be removed or relocated to a position where it's not visible from any neighboring property." "Preston, that playground serves 6 families on this street. The kids love it. It's safe, well-maintained, and it keeps children active and playing outside instead of staring at screens." "Irrelevant. Rules exist for a reason. Property values are maintained through consistent aesthetic standards." "Property values?" Rachel's voice rose slightly. "You think a children's playground hurts property values more than your vendetta against anything that brings joy to this neighborhood." Preston's expression hardened. "Careful, Mrs. Morgan. Personal attacks won't help your case. You have 7 days. If the structure isn't removed, you'll face daily fines of $200 until compliance is achieved." He closed the door in her face. Rachel stood on his porch for a long moment, fury building in her chest. Then she pulled out her phone and opened the neighborhood Facebook group. She typed carefully, "Attention Maple Ridge, FAMILIES. The HOA has ordered me to remove the playground equipment from my backyard within 7 days due to a zoning complaint. I wanted to let all the families whose children use it know that this will be its last week. I'm sorry to those of you whose kids loved playing there." She attached a photo of the certified letter and hit post. Within an hour, her phone exploded with responses. By the next morning, 43 comments filled the thread. Parents were furious. Several mentioned they'd specifically chosen homes on Maple Ridge Lane because it seemed family-friendly. Others pointed out that Preston himself had a decorative fountain in his front yard that violated the same covenant's restrictions on ostentatious water features. Rachel's doorbell rang at 8. Diana stood there with Marcus and 3 other mothers from the street. "We're going to the next HOA meeting," Diana said. "We're going to fight this. The next meeting isn't for 2 weeks, my deadline is in 6 days." Jennifer Kowalski stepped forward. "Then we need an emergency meeting. The bylaws say any homeowner can request one with 24 hours notice if they can get signatures from 15% of residents." "That's 12 signatures out of 80 homes," calculated Sarah Henderson, another neighbor. "We can do that today." Rachel felt something loosen in her chest. "You'd all do that?" "Rachel, our kids spend hours every week on that playground," Sarah said. "Olivia and Owen talk about it constantly. It's not just equipment, it's where they've made friends, it matters." By noon, they had 16 signatures. Rachel submitted the emergency meeting request to the HOA board, citing the playground removal as an urgent community matter requiring immediate discussion. Preston responded via email within an hour. "Emergency meeting request denied. The matter is administrative, not substantive. The covenant violation is clear and non-negotiable. Remove the structure or face fines." Rachel read the email to the gathered mothers in her living room. "He can't just deny it," Jennifer said. "The bylaws specifically state." "Preston rewrote half the bylaws 3 years ago," Diana interrupted. "He added clauses giving the president unilateral authority over administrative enforcement matters." Rachel set down her phone. "Then he's left me no choice." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "If he wants the playground cleared, I'll clear it, exactly as ordered." The mothers exchanged confused glances. Rachel smiled for the first time in 2 days. "But I never said where I'd clear it to." The next morning was Saturday. Rachel posted another message in the neighborhood group. "To all families on Maple Ridge Lane, the HOA has refused to discuss the playground situation. Therefore, I will be complying with their order to clear the playground from my backyard. However, I'm not throwing it away. Starting Monday at 9 a.m., the playground equipment will be relocated to the street in front of my house on public property where HOA covenants don't apply. It will remain there as a public play area for any neighborhood children who want to use it. Bring your kids. Bring snacks. Let's show the HOA what community actually looks like." The responses came immediately. "We'll be there." "Brilliant idea." "Preston is going to lose his mind." "Good, Marcus and I will bring sidewalk chalk." Rachel spent Saturday and Sunday researching property lines and public right-of-way laws. Her house sat on a corner lot where Maple Ridge Lane intersected with Oak Street. The area between the sidewalk and the street, the tree lawn, was technically public property maintained by the city, not governed by HOA restrictions. She could legally place the playground there. On Sunday evening, she hired a local moving company specializing in outdoor equipment. They'd arrive Monday morning at 8. Emma was thrilled when Rachel explained the plan. "So it's going to be like a park where everyone can play." "Exactly like that, sweetheart." "Will Mr. Whitmore be mad?" Rachel knelt down to her daughter's level. "Probably, but sometimes doing the right thing makes people angry. That doesn't mean we stop doing it." Monday morning arrived clear and bright. The moving crew showed up at 8, and by 8:30 they'd begun disassembling the playground equipment. Rachel had marked out the exact area on the tree lawn where each piece would go, carefully measured to ensure every component stayed within public property boundaries. By 9 a.m., the first families started arriving. Diana brought Marcus and a wagon full of juice boxes. Jennifer showed up with Lily and a basket of muffins. Sarah arrived with the twins and blankets to sit on. More families came, some Rachel barely knew, others from streets beyond Maple Ridge Lane who'd seen the Facebook posts. By 9:30, 15 children were gathered on the tree lawn, watching with fascination as the moving crew reassembled the fort, the swings, and the slide. Preston Whitmore's Mercedes pulled up at 9:45. He stepped out of his car, his face already red. "What the hell is this?" Rachel stood up from where she'd been sitting with Emma. Good morning, Preston. I'm complying with your order. The playground has been cleared from my backyard. This is not what I meant, and you know it. Your letter specified the equipment needed to be removed from my property due to covenant violations. This is no longer on my property. This is public right-of-way. The HOA has no authority here. Preston's hands clenched at his sides. You're deliberately circumventing the spirit of the covenant. No, I'm following the letter of your order while ensuring neighborhood children still have a safe place to play. If you have an issue with that, take it up with the city. More parents had gathered now, forming a loose semicircle behind Rachel. Preston looked at them, then at the growing number of children climbing on the equipment, then back at Rachel. This is a public nuisance, he said. I'll report it to the city as an unlicensed park. Please do, Rachel said calmly. I've already contacted the city planning office. As long as the equipment doesn't block pedestrian access or create a traffic hazard, temporary recreational use of tree lawn space is permitted. I have it in writing. Preston's jaw worked silently. This isn't over. He got back in his Mercedes and drove away. The gathered parents erupted in applause. Emma hugged Rachel's waist. Diana raised her juice box in a toast. To Rachel Morgan, she announced, the woman who beat the HOA with their own rulebook. The children played until noon, their laughter echoing down Maple Ridge Lane. Rachel sat on one of the blankets, watching Emma go down the slide for the 20th time, and felt something she hadn't felt in days. Victory! But she also felt something else. A nagging certainty that Preston Whitmore wasn't done, and whatever came next would be worse. The first sign of trouble came Tuesday afternoon. A city inspector arrived with a clipboard, examining the playground equipment with meticulous attention. He measured distances from the curb, checked the stability of each component, and took photographs from multiple angles. Rachel watched from her porch. After 40 minutes, he approached her. Mrs. Morgan, I'm David Reeves, City Safety Inspector. I received a complaint about playground equipment on public property. Is there a problem? The equipment itself appears safe and well-maintained. However, I do need to inform you that while temporary recreational use of tree lawn space is permitted, you'll need to obtain a permit if the equipment remains in place for more than 14 consecutive days. The permit costs $85 and requires proof of liability insurance. Rachel nodded. I can do that. There's one other issue. He consulted his clipboard. The complaint specifically mentioned that the equipment creates a public gathering nuisance. I've been asked to monitor the situation and determine if the number of children using the equipment constitutes a violation of public assembly ordinances. Public assembly ordinances. Gatherings of more than 25 people on public property without a special event permit can be restricted if they create traffic concerns or disturb residential peace. Rachel's stomach sank. Who filed this complaint? I'm not at liberty to say, but it came through a city council member's office, which gives it priority status. After he left, Rachel called Diana. Preston has connections at City Hall, Diana explained. His daughter is married to Councilman Bryant. He's probably pulling strings. So he's going to use the city to accomplish what the HOA couldn't. Looks that way. Rachel stood at her front window watching children play on the equipment. Today there were 12 kids out there. Tomorrow might be more. If it reached 25, would the city actually shut it down? Wednesday morning, Rachel drove to the law office of Michelle Torres, an attorney who'd been recommended by Jennifer Kowalski. Michelle specialized in property law and HOA disputes. Rachel explained the entire situation: the original complaint, the playground relocation, Preston's apparent use of city connections to create new obstacles. Michelle listened carefully, taking notes. Here's the reality, she said when Rachel finished. Preston is operating in a legal gray area. He can pressure the city to enforce ordinances, but those ordinances have to be enforced consistently. If the city allows block parties, neighborhood gatherings, and other events without permits, they can't selectively target your playground. So what do I do? Document everything. Every time children use the playground, take photos with timestamps. Show that it's organic community use, not organized events. Meanwhile, I'll file a formal complaint with the city about selective enforcement if they try to shut you down. How much will this cost? Michelle quoted a retainer fee that made Rachel wince, but she paid it. This had become about more than a playground. It was about whether people like Preston could weaponize bureaucracy to eliminate anything they personally disliked. Thursday and Friday passed quietly. The playground saw steady use, 8 to 15 children daily, never quite reaching the 25 threshold that would trigger permit requirements. Parents brought their kids after school and stayed to supervise. It became a genuine community gathering space. But Friday evening, Rachel received an email from the HOA board, not from Preston directly but from Margaret Yates, the board secretary. Dear Mrs. Morgan, the HOA board has scheduled a special hearing regarding your continued violation of community standards. While you have technically removed the playground from your property, your actions have created a public spectacle that reflects poorly on Maple Ridge Lane and potentially damages property values. The board will vote on whether to impose additional fines and penalties. The hearing will be held Monday at 7 p.m. at the community center. Your attendance is mandatory. Rachel read it twice, fury building with each word. Public spectacle reflects poorly. These people genuinely believed that children playing together was somehow shameful. She forwarded the email to Michelle Torres, then posted about the hearing in the neighborhood group. The response was immediate and overwhelming. We're all coming to that hearing. Preston needs to hear from actual families. Someone should look into whether he's even enforcing covenants consistently. That last comment came from a homeowner named Robert Garcia who lived on the opposite end of Maple Ridge Lane. He followed up with a private message to Rachel. Preston has a hot tub on his back deck that violates the same visibility rules he's using against you. I can see it from my second-floor window. If he's going to enforce covenants, they should apply to everyone, including him. Rachel felt a grim smile cross her face. Saturday morning, she drove past Preston's house and parked where she could see his backyard. Sure enough, a large hot tub sat prominently on an elevated deck, clearly visible from multiple angles. She took photos, checked the covenant language, and confirmed that it violated Article 7, Section 3, the exact same rule Preston had used against her playground. Sunday evening, she prepared for the hearing. Michelle Torres agreed to attend. Diana, Jennifer, Sarah, and 8 other families confirmed they'd be there. Robert Garcia sent Rachel detailed photographs of Preston's hot tub from 3 different angles, all clearly showing it violated covenant restrictions. Rachel barely slept Sunday night. Emma asked why she seemed worried. I'm not worried, sweetheart. I'm just ready to fight for what's right. Monday arrived like a storm front. The community center meeting room filled rapidly. By 6:45, every seat was taken. Parents lined the walls. Rachel recognized faces from the playground, mothers and fathers who'd watched their children climb and swing and laugh together over the past week. Preston sat at the front table with 4 other board members. His expression was carefully neutral, but Rachel could see tension in his shoulders. At precisely 7 p.m., he called the meeting to order. We're here to address the ongoing situation created by Mrs. Rachel Morgan's refusal to properly comply with HOA covenant enforcement. While she has technically removed the playground equipment from her property, her actions have created a public disruption and brought unwanted attention to our community. Michelle Torres stood. Point of order. What specific covenant is Mrs. Morgan currently violating? Preston's eyes narrowed. She's not violating a specific covenant. This is about community standards and property values. Then this hearing has no legitimate basis. You can't fine a homeowner for community standards that aren't codified in the covenants. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Preston held up a hand. The board has authority to address matters that affect the community's reputation and property values, even if not explicitly covered by existing covenant language. Actually, Michelle said, the bylaws require any enforcement action to cite specific covenant violations. Otherwise, it's arbitrary and unenforceable. Preston's face reddened. Mrs. Morgan deliberately created a spectacle to embarrass this board. Rachel stood. I created a safe place for children to play after you ordered me to remove it from my property. Everything I've done has been legal and appropriate. Your actions have made our neighborhood a laughingstock, Preston snapped. Diana Chen rose from her seat. The only laughingstock here is an HOA president who thinks children playing is shameful. More voices joined in, parents expressing support for Rachel, others questioning why the board was wasting time on this instead of addressing actual problems like the broken streetlights on Oak Street or the deteriorating common area landscaping. Preston banged a gavel on the table. "Order, this meeting will proceed in an orderly fashion or I'll have everyone removed." Robert Garcia stood in the back. "Before we go further, I'd like to submit a formal covenant violation complaint." Preston looked startled. "What?" Article 7, Section 3 prohibits permanent recreational structures visible from neighboring properties without prior approval. Preston, your hot tub is clearly visible from my second-floor windows, from the Johnsons' property, and from the street when walking past your house at certain angles. Here are photographs documenting the violation. He held up enlarged prints of the photos Rachel had taken. The room went silent. Preston's face drained of color. "That's different. The hot tub is on a raised deck. It's part of the home's architecture." "The covenant makes no such distinction," Robert said calmly. "A structure is a structure. If Mrs. Morgan's playground violated this rule, so does your hot tub." Margaret Yates leaned over to examine the photographs. The other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Michelle Torres spoke again. "It appears the HOA president has been selectively enforcing covenants in a discriminatory manner. That opens the HOA to potential legal liability." Preston slammed his hand on the table. "This is absurd. The hot tub has been there for 4 years. No one has complained. And Mrs. Morgan's playground existed for 6 months before you complained," Rachel said quietly. "The difference is that mine served the community, yours serves only you." The crowd erupted in applause. Preston stood abruptly. "This meeting is adjourned." "You can't adjourn without a vote," Margaret said. "That's not procedurally valid." "Fine." Preston's voice was tight with rage. "All in favor of imposing fines against Mrs. Morgan for unspecified community standards violations." No hands went up. The 4 other board members sat motionless, clearly unwilling to support an action that had no legal foundation and made them all look petty. Preston looked around the table in disbelief. "This board is supposed to maintain standards." "We're supposed to serve the community," Margaret said quietly. "I move that we dismiss all complaints against Mrs. Morgan's playground and table Robert Garcia's complaint against Preston's hot tub pending a full covenant review to ensure consistent enforcement going forward." "Second," said another board member immediately. The motion passed 4-1. Preston was the only dissenting vote. Rachel felt tears prickling her eyes. Emma, sitting beside her, squeezed her hand. But Preston wasn't finished. He stood, gathering his papers with sharp, angry movements. "If this is how this board operates, I resign as president, effective immediately. You can all watch as property values collapse and Maple Ridge Lane becomes known as the neighborhood where anything goes." He walked out, the door slamming behind him. No one tried to stop him. Margaret Yates looked at the remaining board members, then at the gathered crowd. "Well, I suppose we'll need to elect a new president. But first, I think we owe Mrs. Morgan an apology on behalf of the board for the way this situation was handled." The applause that followed was thunderous. 2 weeks later, Rachel sat on a blanket on the tree lawn, watching Emma and Marcus build elaborate structures in the sandbox. The playground had become a permanent fixture of Maple Ridge Lane, beloved by families throughout the neighborhood. Margaret Yates had been elected as the new HOA president in an emergency vote. Her first action was to revise the covenant enforcement procedures to require board consensus before any violation notice could be sent, preventing future abuses of power. Preston's house went up for sale 3 days after his resignation. Rachel heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he'd decided to move to a gated community where the HOA had even stricter rules. It seemed fitting. Diana walked over with a pitcher of lemonade and cups for everyone. "You know what's funny? Property values on Maple Ridge Lane have actually gone up since the playground became public. Real estate agents are marketing it as a unique community amenity." Rachel laughed. "Preston would hate that." "Good, he deserves to." Jennifer Kowalski approached with her daughter. Rachel, I wanted to thank you again. Lily asks every morning if we can go to the playground. She's made friends she never would have met otherwise. That's what it's for, Rachel said. As the afternoon sun slanted golden across the street, more families arrived. Children ran and played while parents chatted and supervised. Someone had brought a speaker and was playing music. It felt less like a playground and more like a spontaneous block party. Emma ran over breathless and happy. Mom, can we stay until dinner? Rachel pulled her daughter close. We can stay as long as you want, sweetheart. She looked at the playground, the structure that had caused so much conflict and ultimately brought a community together. Preston had ordered her to clear it, thinking he could eliminate something that brought joy simply because it disrupted his vision of perfect aesthetic conformity. Instead, she'd turned his petty enforcement into something far bigger, a reminder that communities were built on connection and shared space, not rigid adherence to arbitrary rules. The playground stayed where it was, children's laughter echoing down Maple Ridge Lane every afternoon, a permanent monument to the fact that sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to let small-minded people make the world smaller. And every time Rachel walked past Preston's old house with its "for sale" sign still standing in the yard, she smiled and thought about how he'd tried to protect property values by eliminating joy, only to discover that joy was exactly what made a neighborhood valuable in the first place.